In the early 1970s, two governments found themselves in a peculiar but pragmatic embrace. One was the apartheid regime in Pretoria, a white minority government facing growing international isolation, economic sanctions, and internal mass resistance. The other was the autocratic monarchy of Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi in Tehran, a ruler whose secret police, the SAVAK, had made his name synonymous with political repression, even as he transformed Iran into a regional military superpower flush with oil wealth. What united these two governments was less ideological affinity than a shared conviction that the communist tide advancing through Africa and the Middle East needed to be stopped, and that each country could provide something vital the other lacked. South Africa, under Prime Minister John Vorster, needed oil desperately. The Arab oil embargo of 1973 had exposed just how precarious Pretoria's energy security was, and Iran under the Shah was, at the time, South Africa's single most important oil supplier. Without Iranian crude, the apartheid war machine, stretched across southern Angola and the Namibian border, would have been crippled. Iran, meanwhile, needed prestige, technical capacity, and a strategically located naval partner capable of helping monitor the shipping lanes that carried Iranian oil to its customers. The Indian Ocean was the artery of the Shah's economic ambitions, and the Cape of Good Hope was its southern choke point. The relationship was underpinned by something even older than Cold War politics: personal history. The Shah's father, Reza Shah Pahlavi, had been forced to abdicate under British and Soviet pressure during World War II and was sent into exile. He spent his final years not in London or Geneva, but in the leafy Johannesburg suburb of Mountain View, where he died of a heart ailment on July 26, 1944, at the age of 66. For the younger Shah, this gave South Africa an almost sentimental resonance, a country that had sheltered his family when the great powers discarded them. Personal friendships reinforced the structural logic of cooperation. South Africa's Foreign Minister Dr. Hilgard Muller and his Iranian counterpart Ardeshir and Zahidi were close friends who had known each other since both served as their respective countries' ambassadors in London in the early 1960s. In October 1971, South African State President Jim Fouché traveled to Iran alongside Muller and his wife to attend the spectacular 2500th anniversary celebrations of the Persian Empire at Persepolis, an event attended by the royalty and heads of state of 69 nations. The South Africans were treated with warmth and distinction, seated among the great and the powerful at one of the most extravagant gatherings of the Cold War era. It was against this backdrop of personal chemistry and mutual strategic need that, in mid-1972, a formal naval cooperation agreement was signed between the South African and Iranian navies. Under its terms, a representative of the Imperial Iranian Navy was permanently stationed in Cape Town, while South Africa posted an officer to Tehran. It was the most concrete expression of an alignment that both governments carefully kept from the full scrutiny of the world, particularly the United States, whose own covert dealings with the Shah needed no embarrassing association with the pariah state at the tip of Africa. The Iranian Navy of this era was a genuinely formidable force. By the early 1970s, it comprised 3 destroyers, for guided missile frigates, for corvettes, coastal and inshore minesweepers, 16 patrol boats, and 12 hovercraft, crewed by approximately 13,000 officers and men, nearly 3 times the size of the 4,500-strong South African Navy. The Shah was in the middle of an ambitious modernization program, purchasing advanced warships from British shipyards and seeking regional partners who could provide maintenance, dry dock facilities, and technical expertise as the fleet passed through the Cape on its delivery voyages from the United Kingdom to the Persian Gulf. South Africa's naval infrastructure at Simon's Town, on the eastern shore of the Cape Peninsula, was perfectly positioned to serve this need. The timing for both countries could hardly have been better. The first Iranian warship ever to call at the Cape arrived in June 1970, and its arrival was treated as something of a sensation. The vessel was the IIS Artemis, the newly commissioned flagship of the Imperial Iranian Navy, and she was no ordinary ship. She had begun life as HMS Louis, a Royal Navy battle-class destroyer built in the closing years of the Second World War and commissioned in 1946. After barely 7 years of active service, the Royal Navy declared her surplus and placed her in reserve. In 1967, She was transferred to Iran and over 3 years underwent an extensive modernization in British shipyards that transformed her profile entirely. A new plated mast was erected to carry a Plessy AWS-1 long-range search radar. An enclosed bridge replaced the old open deck above the forward superstructure. The twin 4.5-inch guns were retained but brought under a modern radar-guided fire control system. Anti-aircraft defenses were overhauled, with 4 single 40 and 60mm guns added alongside a quadruple Sea-Cat missile launcher fitted on a new deckhouse aft. The result was a lean, capable warship, modern enough to lead a rapidly growing fleet. Commissioned on January 21, 1970 as the IIS Artemis, she set sail for the Persian Gulf via the Cape of Good Hope in June that year. Under the command of Lieutenant Commander Parvez Shalati, she put into Simon's Town for supplies and shore leave. The visit was notable enough that the Chief of the South African Navy, Vice Admiral H. Bierman, and Rear Admiral James Johnson were hosted aboard on June 18, 1970. The Artemis carried a ship's company of 230 men, and the sight of so many Iranian sailors moving through Cape Town and the surrounding peninsula was remarked upon with bemused curiosity by the apartheid regime's own official military magazine, Commando, which noted that there had been a lot of foreign seamen observed in the Cape Peninsula. The ship made a further call at Durban before heading north. Few who watched her depart could have guessed that within 4 years, the Cape would become the unlikely venue for her major refit. The formal 1972 Naval Cooperation Agreement brought more Iranian hulls south. The Imperial Iranian Navy had taken delivery of 4 Somme-class guided missile frigates, purpose-built by Vosper Thornycroft and Vickers Armstrong in Britain, and it was agreed that all 4 would dock at Simon's Town on their delivery voyages for guarantee inspections and rectification of any latent defects attributable to their builders. The first pair, IIS Somme and IIS Zal, entered the Selborne graving dock at the Simon's Town Naval Base in July 1972. Their ship badges were mounted on the historic dry dock wall, a tradition continued by subsequent visiting vessels, and their commanders and officers were formally hosted by Vice Admiral James Johnson, the Chief of the South African Navy. The Commander-in-Chief of the entire Imperial Iranian Navy, Admiral Farajallah Rizai, made a point of traveling to Simon's Town for the occasion. The fanfare was not merely ceremonial. The South African dockyard workers and engineers who carried out the guarantee inspections were performing real and technically demanding work on frontline warships. The 2 sister frigates, IIS Faramars and IIS Rostam, followed in March 1974. When the second pair departed on their northward passage, the South African Navy went further still. The large replenishment vessel SAS Tafelberg was tasked to escort the 2 frigates as far as the equator, ensuring safe passage through the South Atlantic before they turned for the Persian Gulf. It was a remarkable commitment, a South African warship steaming deep into the Atlantic in service of an Iranian fleet, and a measure of how seriously both navies took the partnership. The human element of this bustling cooperation also produced its own moments of comedy. Michael Wainwright, a young dockyard apprentice at Simon's Town during this period, later recalled being sent to complete a small repair job in the tiller flat of one of the frigates, only to find the ship moving under him before he could finish. By the time he emerged, he was far out in False Bay and briefly terrified of ending up in Iran, saved only by the presence of the naval harbor master, Captain Jack Netterberg, who was leaving by tug and offered the panicked apprentice a lift back to shore. These visits gave South Africa's private and naval engineering sector a steady stream of contracted work at a time when international isolation was beginning to bite. The country's shipbuilding and repair industry had spent the 1960s quietly growing in sophistication, with the naval dockyard at Simon's Town having converted 2 destroyers and 3 frigates for the South African Navy during this period. Private yards like Globe Engineering Works in Cape Town, along with Dorman Long, James Brown, and Sandock Austral in Durban, were building and repairing both naval and commercial vessels. The Iranian contracts were not just politically convenient, they were commercially valuable and technically confirming. They demonstrated to both parties that South African engineers could do work on a standard equivalent to what British shipyards offered. That confidence was about to be put to its most significant test. By 1974, the IIS Artemis needed work. Iran's flagship had been in service for 4 years, sailing the demanding waters of the Persian Gulf and the Indian Ocean, and the complex electronic systems added during her British refit required attention. Her Plessy radar equipment in particular needed upgrading and recalibration, work that involved not just mechanical competence but sophisticated electronics expertise. The decision was made to send her back to the Cape. It was a decision that said something significant about how far the Iran-South Africa naval relationship had developed in just 4 years. The contract went to Globe Engineering Works, a long-established Cape Town company specializing in marine and industrial engineering, ship repair, and mechanical services. Globe would handle the mechanical and structural work, while the electronics and radar systems were entrusted to Plessy, the same British defense and telecommunications company that had supplied the systems in the first place. Overseeing the entire operation on behalf of the Imperial Iranian Navy were South African Navy dockyard contract supervisors, whose technical authority gave the refit the same quality assurance framework that applied to South African naval vessels. The commercial terms of the contract, according to contemporary sources, were structured to minimize the transfer of South African foreign currency, a financially elegant arrangement that kept costs manageable for both parties at a time when sanctions were making South Africa's international transactions increasingly complicated. The Artemis arrived in Cape Town Harbor and moored alongside at Globe Engineering's facilities, her tall modernized profile visible against the backdrop of Table Mountain. What followed was a sustained period of close technical collaboration between South African engineers and the Iranian naval crew that remained aboard throughout the refit. The ship was in a foreign harbor at the southern tip of a continent that the rest of the world was rapidly distancing itself from, and yet the practical business of marine engineering proceeded with professional efficiency. Structural inspections were carried out, mechanical systems overhauled, and the radar and fire control systems updated under Plessy's guidance. The work represented the practical apex of everything the 1972 cooperation agreement had promised. On completion of the refit in August 1974, the Artemis sailed the short distance from Cape Town Harbor to Simonstown to conduct tilt tests, standard post-refit stability assessments that verify a warship's ballast and load distribution are within safe parameters. Satisfied with the results, the Iranian crew prepared for the long voyage home. The Artemis had been given a new lease of operational life, several thousand nautical miles from the nearest British shipyard, by engineers who worked for a government that most of the world's navies would soon be refusing to associate with at all. The wider context makes the achievement all the more striking. By the mid-1970s, South Africa was entering a period of accelerating international isolation. The UN had labeled apartheid a crime against humanity in 1973. The Soweto uprising of 1976 and the death of activist Steve Biko in police custody in 1977 would further magnify international condemnation further. France, which had been South Africa's most accommodating arms supplier, having agreed to sell frigates and submarines, was in the process of canceling those contracts under UN embargo pressure. Britain had already stopped selling offensive naval systems. The window in which South Africa could participate openly in the international naval order was closing fast. The Iranian relationship, however, lasted a few years longer than most. The end came swiftly and completely. The 1979 Islamic Revolution overthrew the Pahlavi dynasty, abolished the Imperial Iranian Navy, and installed the Ayatollah Khomeini as supreme leader. The new Islamic Republic severed all ties with the apartheid government in Pretoria and inverted the relationship entirely. Iran shifted from being South Africa's most critical strategic partner to becoming a vocal supporter of the anti-apartheid liberation movement. The oil supply dried up. The Naval Cooperation Agreement became a dead letter. The ship badges on the dry dock wall at Simonstown suddenly felt like artifacts from another world entirely. The 4 Somme-class frigates that South African engineers had inspected and launched were renamed by the new Iranian government: Alvand, Alborz, Savalon, and Sahand. 3 remain in service with the Islamic Republic of Iran Navy today, more than half a century after they first entered the Selborne graving dock. The 4th, Sahand, was sunk by the United States Navy during Operation Praying Mantis on April 18, 1988, in the closing stages of the Iran-Iraq War. As for the Artemis herself, the flagship that South African hands had refitted at Globe Engineering in 1974, she did not survive the revolution either. Under the new Islamic Republic, the battle-class destroyer, whose refit had been the crowning achievement of the Apartheid-era naval partnership, was decommissioned and struck from the register. What remains is a history almost too strange to have been invented. Two authoritarian governments, each reviled by the liberal international order, quietly sharing shipyards, engineers, and naval expertise at the bottom of Africa. In an era of ideological alignments and Cold War posturing, the Iran-South Africa naval partnership was something more pragmatic and more human. Two states that the world had cast out, making use of each other while the window remained open and leaving behind only a row of ship badges on an old dry dock wall in Simonstown to mark that they had ever been there at all.